Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning if you're in other time zone. I have again the honor to welcome all of you. Normally we will be with 170 subscribing people this evening for a top presentation by Björn Boyschot. The presentation is DevOps Test Alone and has been winning last year the Best Presentation Award on Eurostar. For those who don't know Eurostar, that's the biggest test conference in Europe. Also this year, I believe Björn doesn't like to be working for us because he was opening keynote in Moscow at the TestCon 2020, but also TestCon Europe in Vilnius. So traveling the world will become his share as experienced presenter from CTG. He has been working for us for 15 years, Björn, and at the start of his career, he was and is still specializing in test automation, and test automation, let that be the key thing when you go for DevOps. So logically this ended and is still continuing to be a DevOps specialization, and also logically Björn became also one of our DASA trainers. Next year, I think we will have to rerun these kind of series because already this year Björn won another Best Presentation Award with how to pitch and value testing properly, and this on the Agile Testing Days in 2020. So we already have a new presentation for next year, but let's first concentrate at the presentation at hand. So welcome on stage, Björn Boyschot.
Okay, so thank you very much, Peter, for this introduction. I hope you haven't set the aims too high for today. So welcome everybody in my name on this session, DevOps Test Alone. So before we deep dive in my presentation, I want to start with some historical facts on the evolution of testing. In 1979, it was the year that Sony released their first ever Walkman. And this was really a milestone in the history of music, as people were now able to listen to music while they were on the move. But it was also a year that the first dedicated book on software testing was published. It was called The Art of Software Testing by Glenford Myers. And this book has really set the foundations for what modern software testing is all about today. He introduced concepts such as black box testing, the economics of software testing, and many, many others. And then we had 1986. I think for a lot of you, 1986 is known as the year that Nintendo released their Nintendo Entertainment System on the world. And this console really revolutionized the way that people played games. It was like the best gaming console ever. I personally remember spending quite some hours playing Mario Bros, Zelda, Metroid. I think most of you gamers will realize what I'm talking about. But for software testing professionals, 1986 was also an important year, because this was the year that the V model was introduced. And this model really demonstrates the relationship between each phase of the development lifecycle and their associated testing phases. And the V model was, for a lot of companies, a starting point to set up a structured testing approach. And then we had 2001. 2001 was the year that the Human Genome Project was released and was actually publicly accessible on the internet. And for us, human beings, this was a milestone. This was the first time we could actually look at the building blocks of us human beings. But in 2001, there was a bunch of people who decided to go skiing in Utah and actually decided not to go skiing. And while they were not skiing, they decided, yeah, you know what? Let's write something down that we now all know as the Agile Manifesto. And this Agile Manifesto was really going to be a game changer for the software industry, but certainly also for testing. Because it's the first time that testing was not the responsibility anymore of a small bunch of people. It became the responsibility of the complete team. And because these small iterations focus on test automation was increasing spectacularly. So for us testers, the Agile Manifesto really was a big game changer. And then we had 2009. 2009 is the year that the first Bitcoin ever got mined. And as we all know, Bitcoins is really something that can actually revolutionize the way that we do payments in the future. But in 2009, we saw another disruption. we saw the disruption of the DevOps days. It was the first year that the DevOps days were organized in the city of Ghent. And this conference popularized the software development method called DevOps, in which we actually stress the collaboration between developers, operations, and even today we're looking at Dev, Biz, Sec, Test, Ops. We're actually looking at everybody working together as one big team. And then we had 2011. Now you can see that I marked this in orange because 2011 is actually a sad year. It is the year that Apple's co-founder Steve Jobs died. And as we all know, Jobs was responsible for the disruption of a multitude of industries such as music, movies, computers, telephones, tablets, pretty much anything we can imagine. But 2011 was also a sad year for testing. Because in 2011, Alberto Savoia is the first one to state that testing is dead. And he did this during the opening keynote at the Google Test Automation Conference. So imagine a conference dedicated on test automation, where the guy who's doing the opening keynote telling everybody that the traditional way of doing software is dead or on the decline. So in 32 years, we went from the first dedicated book on our software testing profession to a more structured approach with the V model, to more emphasis that testing is a team responsibility, to even the merger of dev and ops and test teams, to the first announcement that our profession is dead. This is quite a heavy journey we went through. This is only in 32 years. So it is also at that point that a lot of test professionals really became worried for their jobs. We started hearing rumors from big tech companies in the DevOps world about the fact that they didn't need any testers anymore. Google said we fired all testers. There were companies saying we replaced testers by robots actually clicking on the keyboard like this, because yeah, that's what a tester does. We only click buttons on a keyboard. That's our main job. And most of the testers became afraid, and they all blamed this on the DevOps movement because it was actually emerging at the same time. But now, if we look a bit deeper at the DevOps statement, or one of the statements of what DevOps is, and I'm not going to read through the statement, but if you look at this, it's all about continuous improvement, faster releases, faster feedback, improving quality, improving value. If I read this, I'm reading testing, 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 testing. Now, if we cannot blame it on the DevOps movement, let's take a look at ourselves. What about testing? What did we do the last 20 years in order to evolve our profession? Well, we've invested quite some more money and time in test automation. We've matured some of our testing processes. But if you ask me, we're still playing catch up. We're still trying to understand how to adjust and adapt to this new reality. And this struck me quite a lot when I was looking back at the talk Testing is Dead. In this talk, James Whittaker stated that if we would take a tester from the 70s, we would teleport him back into our project, he would be perfectly able to do testing. He would be able to execute tests, to create test cases, to log defects. This actually means that our profession didn't really change that much during the last decades. So based on these facts, I think we shouldn't be surprised that people are actually questioning the traditional ways of testing. But instead of what I think we need to do is, instead of remaining a reactive activity, I think we need to become a more proactive strategy. Now, the way to do this is it will become crucial for us to understand how testing can deliver value. And it's not only about delivering value for the end customer. It's about delivering value to your managers, delivering value to the business, delivering value to the developers, to the operations people, to everybody involved in software delivery. And in a lot of cases, testing will even become a more supportive function to others than we are today. Now, in my opinion, I think we need to focus on 4 major aspects. And the first one is we need to change the way that people see testing. It's not a task performed by an individual. It's not a task performed by a whole team. We should look at it as a strategy. So the first thing we need to do is we need to coach our developers better. We need to make sure that they understand why testing is important and how they can easily contribute to it themselves. And as an example, one of the first things I want to highlight is that we need to tell developers what boundary value analysis is all about. And I want to show you this by giving you an example of a real life project. A few years ago, I was working on a project. I asked my peer developers something like, hey, can I take a look at your unit tests? And they said, yeah, of course, the tests are looking at unit tests. That's great. Here they are. Have fun and look at them. I started reading through them, and what I saw is that they always use the same set of data. And to give you some context, we were creating a software package that calculated the amount of money somebody needs to pay for a specific insurance based on their age, their sex, and their location. And what I noticed in the unit tests is that the developers always took a male of 20 years old and a female of 50 years old. And when I explained them, hey, why don't you use a male of 0 years old, somebody of 200 years old, somebody of minus 200 years old, and they started laughing at me. They said, like, my God, Bjorn, nobody of minus 200 years exists. It's like you're not created yet if you're minus 200 years. And I said, yeah, that's true, but we ask people to fill in a date. We don't check the dates, so they can fill in that they're actually born in year 3000. They can fill in that they're born in the year 1500s, and this will enter your piece of code, and you don't check it neither. So you need to test for this boundary value and values in order to figure out what your code is actually going to do. So this is a simple example of why I think we need to coach or train developers better in these kind of activities. And next to that, I think we can also assist them in creating better performance tests. I've done quite some performance testing in the past, and developers are great at creating performance scripts. They're fantastic in creating technical scripts that execute load on systems, but they are lousy at figuring out performance scenarios. Why is this? Well, we as testers, we have what we call a helicopter overview. We have a very good view on all the batch jobs happening, on all the users working on the system, the transactions we're doing, the other applications using our systems. So as a tester, we can help the developers in creating these performance scenarios while they are creating the technical performance tests. And last but not least, we're also helpful in assisting in the setup of a CI/CD pipeline. Generally, if you look at automated tests, there's a lot of graphic user interface automated tests created by testers. Now, if you incorporate them into a CI chain, developers do CI because they want to have fast and reliable feedback. Now, if we incorporate our automated tests there, and they're not that fast and they are flaky, well, guess what? Developers won't incorporate them anymore, they won't trust them, they will kick them out, and they will actually lose trust in whatever we are doing as testers. So as testers, we really need to make sure that we can focus on the fact that our automated set of regression tests is stable and fast enough to be incorporated into the CI pipeline. But next to coaching developers, we also need to coach our businesses better. And this is, if we coach developers, we need to have more technical testers. If we want to coach business, we need to have testers who are more aligned to the business knowledge. Now, what can we do for the business? Well, first of all, we need to help them with creating smart acceptance criteria. We need to make sure they understand that smart acceptance criteria are good for themselves. If we create smart acceptance criteria, it will make the lives of the developers more easy because they exactly know what they need to code. It will make testers' lives more easy because they know exactly what to test against. But at the end, it will make the business their own lives more easy because they exactly know how to accept or reject software. So this is one very, very important point where we can really help our businesses better. And next to this, reviewing user stories. As I said, we have a great helicopter overview. We have a good information on how the application is being used by end users. So really reviewing user stories is something where we as testers are also great at. And this comes a little bit together with understanding and defining different user personas. Because if we have one super skill as a tester, it is that we can take the brains of an end user, merge them with our own testing brains, and actually look at an application with this merged brain. And we can perfectly define and understand the different personas that are going to be using our software. And this is something where we can help the business in understanding all of these personas. Now, if you want to do all of the above, or what I just explained to you, we need to have very good collaboration. And in order to have good collaboration, we need to have an environment of trust. And trust is something you need to cultivate. It cannot be imposed from top down. We need to cultivate trust. But it's pretty simple to cultivate trust. And the first thing I want to highlight is what I call coffee, 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 and cakes. It's very simple. If you have a question for a developer, you go over to the developer, you ask him to get a cup of coffee, and you talk about the problem you wanted to talk about. If you created some cakes at home and you have some left, bring them with you at the office, put them on your desk, send out a mail. Hey guys, I have some cakes, come and grab them, come and talk to me. This is all about bonding, about getting to know each other through food and drinks. Now, the second thing we need to do in order to have a better trust is have empathy with the developers. We are the bringers of bad news. We are going to tell them that their newborn baby is ugly. If we do this by going over to a developer and saying like, you're lousy, you created a software bug, what a crappy person are you? Of course, they're not going to trust us. They're not going to like us. So have empathy, go over to the developer, bring a cup of coffee, bring some cakes and tell them, hey, I think we have a problem. Let's look at it together. Let's try to fix it. Have empathy with them. And last but not least, celebrate successes and be positive. If a developer creates their first unit test, go over there, congratulate them, say high five, you created your first unit test. If they find a bug you didn't found, be humble, go over, say, great guys, you found a bug I never found as a tester. And most importantly, if you have a successful release, go out, get a drink, eat together, get drunk, I don't care, have fun. Make sure you celebrate your successes, because then you start bonding as a team. Now, in order to do all of this, we need to have good soft skills. And this is really something I blame management for in a lot of companies. Because if we assemble a team, we're always looking at hard skills. We need a Java developer, we need a Kubernetes expert, we need a monitoring guy, we need somebody with good analysis skills, but we never look at soft skills. While a hard skill is easy to train, a soft skill is very, very hard to get better at. So in my opinion, we need to look for people who are bridge builders. We need to look for people who can bring fun. We need to have somebody in the team on whose shoulder you can cry if you have a problem. So please don't neglect these soft skills and only look at hard skills. Soft skills are crucial in getting a collaborative team together. Now, the second big point I want to talk about is embracing DevOps practices. As testers, we don't need to be afraid of DevOps. We should actually embrace some of the techniques in there and use them. Now, the first thing I know, it's bloated. Shift left, everybody's talking about shift left. When nothing goes right, you need to go left. But there is one thing that I do agree with is we need to become more technical. And why is this? Well, we need to understand the technical context of our applications. We don't need to be as good as a programmer as a Java programmers, but we need to understand the technical context so we can talk to developers, so we can create trust. And I want to give you one project example there again. I was working as a coach in a project, and the first thing one of the things I noticed was that defects created by our technical testers were resolved faster than the defects created by our less technical testers. So I went over to Jan, the development lead, and I asked him like, hey Jan, what's happening here? Why are these defects from these technical testers taken up faster than the ones from the non-technical testers? And Jan told me like, yeah, that's normal. You know what? Your technical tester finds a problem, goes to the Unix machine, logs in, go to the log file, looks up the stack trace, copies the stack trace, goes to Google, Google's the stack trace, tries to figure out what's going wrong. Then he goes over to the developer with a piece of cake and a coffee, of course. No, it's just joking. He goes over to the developer and he starts talking to the developer like, hey, I found this problem. I think it has something to do with memory allocation. What's going on? And what happens there is that the developer says like, hey, that guy actually understands what I'm doing. He's speaking the same language as I am. I understand him and he understands me. And what happens is they start bonding. And this is crucial. And only for this aspect, I actually want us to try to speak the same language and that we need to become a little bit more technical. And the last thing, if you create automated tests, please use the same language as your developers do, if it's possible. Because if your developers are using Java to program, and we're using VBA to create our automated test suite, well, good luck if you need some help, because they will probably be laughing at you and they will probably have something like, well, what are they doing in God's name? So if possible, feasible, use the same development language. Now, a second part within DevOps, containerization is a very hot topic these days, but it is something from which we can benefit so much from having a containerized setup for our applications and the test. Again, an example, I was working in a bank somewhere 2 years ago, and they were creating a completely new application, and it was all based on microservices and containerized setup. And at a certain point in time, they asked us, okay, we have a payment service. Now, what happens if we kill that payment service? During a transaction, will the bank lose money? Will the customer lose money? Will it magically recover and will everything be fine? Well, okay, we're going to test this. Now, if we would do this on the normal QA environment, then killing that payment service would actually hinder everybody who's working on that environment. Everybody would lose data while we are killing the payment service. So I started talking to the engineers, to the developers and the architects, explaining the problem. And they told me like, hey, but that's no problem. We have a containerized setup. So what we'll actually do is we'll create a dedicated environment for you. You can kick out the payment service as much as you want. You won't be hindering anybody, and it's your own dedicated environment. And this is what we did. And at the same time, we realized, hey, this is great for automation tests. We can actually, in the start of our build, spin up a containerized environment, run all of our automated tests, and at the end, destroy the complete environment. We will never have any problems with test data anymore. So just to indicate you that containerization is something that can bring you so much value. But of course, this is not something you can set up on your own. You need to go talk to the developers, to the engineers, to the architects, to everybody in order to actually set up such an environment. And then code quality, something I really love to talk about. If this would be a live event or a physical event, let's put it that way, because it's live, I would actually ask you, okay, this bathroom, is it a beautiful bathroom? And you actually want to have this in your house? I assume now that most of you will actually raise your hand and say, yeah, it's a great bathroom. I would immediately install this tomorrow in my house. Now, if I would give you the view on the back end of that bathroom, on the plumbing, I can imagine that most of you will say like, no, this is not what I want to have in my house. Because if there's a problem in one of these tubes, it will cost us an awful lot of money to find the problem, and it will cost us an awful lot of time to actually fix it. And this is exactly the same with software. And this is what we call static code analysis and code quality. We're looking at technical depth, at code smells, at code coverage. These are all statistics that generally we have in a project, but we never look at from a testing point of view. Now, if I receive an application with two big components in there, and I can see that on component A there is like 95% code coverage, and on component B there is only 10% code coverage, well, probably I'll spend more time testing component B than component A, because component A already has a lot of unit tests running against it. So if you're in a DevOps team and if these metrics are out there, make sure as a tester that you can get access to them, that you understand them, and that you know what they actually mean, because they can be very, very helpful. Now, the third point I want to talk about is leveraging production more. Sometimes it seems for us that we are afraid of our production environment. It's like a nuclear no-go zone, nobody can touch it. But now we're bringing actually Dev and Ops together. So this should allow us to get access to the rich world of production data. First of all, if we look at production data, we can look at some metrics. Earlier on, if we needed to have metrics, if we needed to have information on how our application was used in production, we needed to look at reported defects, surveyed shortcomings, reviews, feedbacks from users, all that kind of data. But now, because we are together with the ops team, we can get access to that data much more easily. And I want to give you 3 examples of what I encountered in some projects I was working on. And the first example is around user journey that we actually use to tweak our testing strategy. This story is about one of our financial customers, and they had a APM solution in production they used, and this APM solution allowed them to see the user journey that all users did on the production environment. So what actually happened is you can see a user coming into the application, seeing that he enters on screen A, goes back to screen 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then exits. So that is the information you actually capture in production. Now, when I heard this, I thought to myself, I had something like, hey, but this is great. What if we use the same solution on our acceptance environment and we run this solution while we do our regression tests? Now we get an overview of all the user journeys we do as regression tests, and then we compare them with what we have in production, and they should be pretty much the same. And what we actually figured out was that some of our end users had user journeys through our application in production we never figured out were possible. We didn't even know people were that crazy, because trust me, people are crazy in production. They do stuff with your site that you never built it for. And this actually allowed us to tweak our testing strategy. It made our regression test set much better. And then a second example of what we did is around performance statistics. When you create performance tests, you need to have some statistics. How much load, how many concurrent users, which batch jobs, from where are users coming, all of these data to actually create your performance test. And to be very honest, a lot of this data is like, I think it's 2,000 transactions with 500 users coming from Europe, perhaps from America, perhaps 1,000 users. We think it's about something like this. Well, if you're now sitting together with your ops people, you can ask this. You can ask, how many transactions do we have? Where is the load coming from? Show me the data, show me the statistics. And based on this information, you can finally create very good performance tests that really simulate production loads. And last but not least, crash reporting. This is actually a story from a pharmaceutical customer of ours. They were creating a mobile app, a new mobile app, and they had a tool that they actually shipped together with the app. And what happened is that if an end user goes through the app and they hit a problem, they have a bug, what happens is that the 2 minutes before they encountered that problem, all of different screenshots are actually continuously taken. The 2 minutes before the error are actually kind of like recorded. And the app sends an email to the operations people with all of the screenshots of the 2 minutes before the problem, a screenshot of the problem itself, and attached to it the log file on the mobile devices app. That is actually what's happening. Now, while talking to the operations people, I heard this and I had something like, hey, if we're doing exploratory testing while we're in QA phase, the problem I always have is that I'm doing exploratory testing, I find a problem, and I never ever remember what I did 5 minutes before. Okay, it's perhaps something personal that my, let's say, memory only lasts for 2 minutes, but I think generally most people have this problem. Now, if we could reuse that same technology the operations people are using during exploratory testing, we actually have automatically created bugs if we find them. We just need to click send mail to the developer. We know the stack trace, we know the error, we know the screenshots. We have a perfectly explainable bug. So that's about it for metrics. Another thing, I'm going to be very honest here. I don't have a lot of experience in experimentation. I would love to get more experience in, but this is really a fabulous field to look into, experimentation. One of the most known examples, I think, of experimentation is A/B testing, and a very cool example of this is what we call the 40 Shades of Blue A/B test by Google. Now, what happened is that Google had 2 colors of blue, and they wanted to go to 1 color of blue. Normal company would say, "Einy, miny, mo, that's the color of blue we're going to take for all of our applications," or call a graphic user designer and say, which is the most beautiful color of blue. What did Google say? No, 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 no. We are a company that fancies on data, so we're going to do an A/B test. We're going to take 40 different shades of blue. We're going to present them to all of our users around the world, and we're going to measure which color of blue for a link gets the most click-throughs, which we call conversion rate. And the color of blue with the highest conversion rate is the color of blue we're going to use in all Google applications. So this is a perfect example of an A/B test that now resulted in one color of blue throughout any Google application. And the other experiment I want to talk about is Canary releases. I think Netflix is probably the company most known for Canary releases. A Canary release has nothing to do with testing. It's actually a safe way to release software or new versions into production. Now, what happens with a Canary release is we have a set of production service of version 1.0. What we're going to do is we're going to provision a few servers, which we call baselines, also with version 1.0. And then we're going to provision a few Canary release servers, which has our latest version 2.0. Now, what we're going to do is we have a load balancer or a router in front of this, and we're actually going to redirect most of our production users, of course, to our production environment, and then let's say 20% to our baseline and 20% to our Canary release. And at the same time, we're going to measure and monitoring all of these servers, and we're going to compare this. Do we have more problems on production servers than on Canary servers? Do we have more conversion rates on production server than Canary servers? Do we have more people being happy on Canary servers? Look back at production servers. And if we see that it all remains pretty much the same, we know that we can safely actually roll out version 2.0 to all of our servers in our environment. So this is actually a safe way to release software. And I think as testers, we need to know this. We need to be aware that this is possible, because this will also change the way we actually need to test our software, because we will have multiple versions of the software running at the same time in our production environment. So we need to be able to do rollbacks, roll forwards, etc. So important that we actually know these kind of techniques. Now, I think no DevOps presentation without a slide about tools. I think probably for a lot of people, this is like one of the slides you've been waiting for, which is the best tool on the market. Now, to be very honest, I don't care. I don't care at all. There are thousands of tools out there that can help you. Now, which one is the best one really depends on your needs. The one thing that I'm mostly interested in is try to ensure that you can use them on as many platforms as possible. If you use a test automation tool to do automated testing in dev and test and accept, why don't you use the same tool to actually run synthetic monitor or end user testing in production? If you have an APM solution in production to monitor if something goes wrong, to figure out what actually went wrong, why don't we use that one on dev, test and accept to figure out what goes wrong while we're testing? So all the examples I gave a few slides ago about these tools being reused from operations to testing or testing to operations, try to do this. The more you use a specific tool, the better value you get out of it. The more people are using it, and the better you will get at using that specific tool. Now, to wrap up a little bit, I've talked about adopting testing as a strategy, not a task, to embrace DevOps practices more, that we need to leverage the power of production data, that we need to look at using all of these tools and all of these different environments we have. But what I'm actually wanting to say here is in order to do this, we need to make sure that we strive for quality being built in. So all of the above should ultimately lead to this, built-in quality. And we should really strive to ensure that the quality is built into it and not an afterthought. And this is why I really love this quote by Edward Deming. And to be very honest, this is one of the only quotes ever I practically read out loudly, and it's also what I'm going to do here. The quote from Edward Deming is, "Inspection does not improve the quality nor guarantee quality. Inspection is too late. The quality, good or bad, is already in the product. Quality cannot be inspected into a product or service, it must be built into it." So if there's one slide you remember from this pretty much like 40-minute during presentation, it is this one. We need to strive to build quality into the system. And if we do this, I am persuaded that testing is alive and kicking. We are a cornerstone of DevOps. We are so valuable, so very needed, if we at least focus on the correct activities. So thank you very much for your attention. If there's any questions, I think we hopefully still have some time, because I probably ran a little bit over time. But anyway, thank you for your attention and time for questions and a drink.
Thank you, Bjorn. I know you were perfect on time, and I found it rather mean that you were showing a slide with tools and you let it there for the 5 seconds to look at. But so far, no question about tools, but a couple of interesting ones.
Yeah, great.
Let me run through them. First question, which would be the best between we train DevOps, we train dev people for boundary value tests, or do we train devs to implement validations, front end and back end, of course? Trick question, Bjorn.
Yeah, okay, so it's about the example I gave. To be very honest, I think it's both ways. Yeah, okay, it's also a very good idea to actually check in the front end that only specific date and time frames can actually be passed on by users. But I think at the same time, you also need to do this on code level to actually limit whatever comes in, because you never know if something is going to change on the front end. Then or something goes wrong on the front end, that piece of code or value can actually enter your code. Now, the biggest important thing I wanted to highlight there was actually that we need to make sure that everybody on our team is able to have the necessary testing skills. There are some companies that even say, we don't really have any testers anymore in our squads, but what they actually mean is they have a coach that is training or teaching all of the people in the squad, so all of the developers, everybody, on what proper testing is, how to do exploratory testing, how to do test automation, how to do boundary value analysis, what is the importance of testing. And at the end, yeah, there isn't one tester anymore, but actually all developers are like 25% testers, or the technical testers in there are also part of the team, and we don't call them testers anymore, but actually they are testers. So that was the main message I wanted to pass on there, that I think it's crucial to really make sure everybody in the team is involved in testing, that everybody has a decent knowledge there.
Okay, well, Bram is analyzing which questions to push through. I have already another one by Crystal. I can believe it's not always easy to train people who aren't interested in the technical part of testing. Also, not everybody has the ability or motivation to become or to be more technical. Do you have tips and tricks to convince them or train them? To train them, of course, I have one big tip. We have training.ctg.com, and there, of course, you can find a wealth of trainings. But I will stop the commercial, blah, blah, and let Bjorn answer this one.
No, it's already part of a question. No, the thing is, it's true, and one of the things I also stated, we don't all need to become as technical as developers, and certainly we will not all become technical testers. That's normal. Why? Because if everybody becomes more technical, well, that's great, but nobody's going to look at the business side anymore. So we need to still have people with more business-oriented skills. So in let's say a team, I always prefer to have some more technical testers and some more business-oriented testers, for example. But now, if we want to get testers to be a little bit more technical, I think there's a few tips and tricks. First one is what I do a lot is try to read a lot. Try to read a lot of different blogs, different books, different things people educate you. Look at YouTube movies around all of these aspects and try to broaden your scope. You don't need to become a test automation engineer by definition. But if you're into microservices team and you need to test microservices, you need to understand the complete technical context of microservices. So you need to dig in, read in, try it, experiment it, and of course take some trainings at CTG if you want to. That's what I need to say for my boss or I get fired. But I think getting interested into it, and don't be afraid, because to be very honest, if you only are able to do a small part of it, it will already help you in collaborating with your other more technical people, with the developers. Even if you don't know anything, they will help you also in this, if you show interest at least.
So I think this is the perfect bridge for the next question. That's one about soft skills, because I hear in your answer soft skills and motivation is important. And Pascal is asking the question, it's true that the testing skills are not enough. Soft skills for a tester are essential to cultivate trust. Do you see in the future a tester with soft skill certification, and with Agile, everyone in the team should be trained to testing basics? Do you agree? So there are two questions. One is, do you see a soft skill certification in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, but that's a personal opinion. I think soft skills and certification, both of them together, is for me kind of like a strange thing, because yeah, you need to train your soft skills, or you can follow trainings to actually figure out how to communicate with other people. Because very honestly, I'm a pretty technical guy. And at a certain point in time at CTG, I was forced, between brackets, to go through a MBTI training. Together with the complete team we did an MBTI session, a Myers-Briggs type indicator. And when my boss told me this, the first thing I thought was like, oh my God, this is singing Kumbaya, hugging trees, listening to well music. This is really, I'm a technical guy. I hate this so much. So I went into the session with a mindset of blah. But what I actually figured out there is I always had some issues with one of my colleagues in talking to him. And by doing this MBTI session, I figured out what kind of personality I am, what kind of personality my colleague was. And I finally figured out why we were always clashing, just because the way I present him data was totally not what he needed. I was more the data kind of oriented guy. He was more the feeling person. So I realized that, okay, if I change the way I bring my message with the same information, it's actually consumed totally different by him. So this allowed me to work much better together, actually, between the both of us. So about certification, soft skill, yeah, no certification about it, I doubt it. But there are some trainings that are really going into this. Not to be too commercial, I'm also one of the DASA trainers, and one of the biggest aspects in that training, actually the first 2 to 3 days, are about DevOps culture, mindset, coaching, and typical tips and practices there. Now, does this mean if you're DASA certified that by definition you have good soft skills? No, it will teach you what is important in that cultural aspect, but it is up to you to still go for these soft skills, and the only way to actually get better at them is do it, and learn from what you're doing.
I was already wondering when is he going to mention DASA, but it's a good point. The second part of the question was with Agile, everyone in the team should be trained to the testing basics. Is this something you agree to, Björn?
Yeah, certainly. And this is also what I wanted to bring over in this session is, and what we also see in a lot of companies. I cannot name any names, but I'm actually in the process of training some companies, and there we actually see this is they have coaches to teach everybody in the team what testing is about. They even have some teams without any testers for the moment, but all of the developers get a very thorough testing training. And at the beginning, there is a tester in the team, but the tester is training everybody. And at a certain point in time, it's actually everybody's job to do testing. And there is no complaint anymore. It's like a role or skill set that from day to day goes over from one person to the other, which is also great, because each individual has a own view on a situation, which makes it very interesting, actually, to be very honest.
Okay, I have another really recognizable question that refers to cloud hosting. It's often heard with cloud hosting that you can just increase the number of servers, the environment, if servers become slow or unstable. How do you push or convince your management to keep performance testing as part of the testing activities, and that there is real added value in performance testing in a cloud environment?
Yeah, a few things. I've seen this in the past also. To give a very simple example, even without cloud hosting, I was doing performance testing for a hospital somewhere in Antwerp, and they said like, yeah, we don't have any performance problems. So I started load testing, and actually the application crashed with I think it was four or five users, and they said like, oh, this is not possible. We've added 32 gigabytes of RAM into our machine, and yeah, it was a 30-bit operating system, so it's actually not able to use 32 gigabytes of RAM. It's actually limited at I think it was 4 gigabytes of RAM. So they actually added 28 gigabytes, which was sitting there for nothing, because it's physically not able to use that. Now in cloud, it's not the same, but it's pretty much the same. You can keep on adding hardware, you can keep on adding resources, you can keep on paying, because it costs you a lot of money on paying and adding stuff, but it is not unlimited. And in general, you're not actually fixing the problem, you're just throwing in a workaround, which is needed in the beginning. So once you have a performance problem, you want to fix it very easily or very quickly, okay, you add some machine power, but then you need to try to figure out what's actually going wrong, because if you don't do this, it will get incrementally worse. And trust me, at the end, the costs will be very high. But second of all, you will not be able to actually fix it anymore by just adding hardware. So two things there. We try to actually get performance testing from being an activity at the end to really be something that we do pretty fast. And you can do some very simple, stupid things. One thing we did in a team was we had a lot of functional automated graphic user interface tests of our regression set. And what we did is we said, okay, we're going to measure for each regression set that we run, the amount of hits we do, of queries we do towards the database. And this was measured for any run we did. And now we actually compared all of these metrics for each version we actually built it. And what we figured out sometimes is that from version 1 to 2, we doubled the number of calls to the database, which was not something we expected, which we at that point in time already knew, okay, this is going to give us performance issues, because if you double the number of hits to a database, well, guess what? In production, if you have 2,000 users, the database will probably die, so or have a problem at least. So these kind of things we already incorporated even when we run automated GUI tests, and we're actually, or the company is actually trying to do this now also with unit testing, which is a little bit more complicated because it's a bit more complicated to actually find relationships between the numbers. But if you run automated tests, it's actually perfectly possible to do some extrapolations. And performance, one thing you could do, I don't know which kind of application it is, but if it's in an app store somewhere, or you can find some user reviews. I had this for how to call it without calling the company, with a company that had an app in the app stores, and the dev lead told me, we don't have any problems, we just don't know why people don't like our app. And then when you go to the app store, you saw like something, it crashes all of the time, it is not performant, it is ugly, it never works, with each update it breaks. That's something like, I do think you have a problem with the app. If you look at your competitor, they score 4 and you score 1. And it's all about performance. So I do think you need to do something on performance, just if you look at the App Store.
Okay, thank you. So while I encourage you, our dear audience, to pen down the last questions, or maybe this is a good concluding question, Björn. So in the end, ops, dev, and testers should all be DevOps test engineer, jack of all trade, master of one. Should I be that role in one in a box, in your opinion?
It's actually a great sentence, because it's not a jack of all trades, master of one. It's indeed, it should be master of at least one. So as a tester, you still need to have your master skill being testing. Is it exploratory testing? Is it more focused to test automation? Is it more focused to performance testing? I don't care. You need to have, like, your testing skills are crucial. This is still the backbone of who you are. This is still like 80–90% of all the work you probably are going to do. But you need to indeed become a little broader. I know it's bloated term, T-shaping, but it is true. You're a tester, you're a deep down tester. But you could say, okay, my T-shaping is more development oriented. I'm becoming more technical. I want to look at things like unit testing. You could also say, no, my T-shaping is more business related. I am a great tester and I've worked for 50 years in insurance in companies. Well, guess what? You probably even have better information than the people, the business you're working with in the insurance industry, because you've seen a lot of companies. So the T can go both ways. It can go more to the technical area, or it can go to the more business area in helping the product owner and helping the team understand, the business context you're actually working. Because at the end, you are working for what we call customer value. So it can go both ways, but we need to become more broader than just one specific skill we have. But it's for everybody. Developers also need to become broader and learn how to test. The product owner needs to become broader and needs to understand the technical context of the application. So it's not only testers, it's everybody that actually needs to try to get a little bit broader in what you're doing.
So with this, I thank you, Björn, master of all trades.
No.